So more people than ever are using presentation aids to assist their communication with their prospects and with their clients. We're probably doing more Zoom calls now than we've ever done before, or using other kind of meeting technology, more and more remote calls. And it makes sense that we might start thinking about, well, when I was doing these sort of presentations or meetings in a live environment, I was using PowerPoint slides or keynote slides or visual aids of that type. Maybe I should be using them during my, screen meetings as well. And if you're not, then that might be something you need to consider. So we talk about, what is the value and what is the benefit of using a sort of PowerPoint style presentation. What is the best way to construct those aids? Should we have lots of text, just a few images? Do we need like a contents page? Do we need clear navigation? Should we have a menu bar on the bottom so we can jump around the presentation and be sort of dynamic? And lots and lots more. So Ashley and his team have, famous or very well known for producing presentations. They've produced nearly 1 million slides. He's actually working this out recently, and over 930,000 slides they've produced. And Ashley's been in this industry for over 20 years. So, comes to this interview with a serious amount of experience in this very specific topic. So some other sort of podcasts and interviews have been sort of quite general and really sort of high level sort of business. This is different. We're going to dig into real detail here, and you'll come out with, I think, a really good idea of what the best business advice and practices are for producing a compelling and useful visual presentation tool. So that's enough of me. Let's dive into the interview. I'm here with Mr. Pemberton, or Ashley Pemberton, owner of... Actually, what's the name of your company exactly?
Yeah, my company's called PowerPoint Designers, and a bit of an 80s cliche, does what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
The whole company was born around serving one client, and as clever as I wanted my company name to be, I kind of named it for them, but actually they all just call me Thailand now anyway. They just say, oh, send it to Thailand.
Oh, really? You are Thailand.
Yeah.
You speak behalf of the whole country.
I do, obviously, as far as my little niche of clients are concerned. Sure. Yeah. So actually, at one point they started to call us Thai Express because we deliver very fast service, but Thai Express is just too takeaway. So
what does that mean?
I think what
do you mean by too takeaway?
Well, it sounds like a Thai takeaway.
Oh, literally.
Like
okay.
food. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just thought, no, I'll try and shrug that one off. But no, the company name is currently PowerPoint Designers. Okay. And I also have another company registered in America called Overnight Design. Okay. About 50% of our work is now PowerPoint. When we were born, it was 100%. So it just felt like the right name change.
Yeah. Okay, good. And how long? I know you've been doing it for many years, but I don't know how long exactly.
Yeah, so for me as an individual, I first started in, let's call it creative services, when I was 16. So that's 30 years ago. First got my first serious job as a PowerPoint designer when I was about 20. And I've been working as a firm, as an agency for 13 years. Okay.
So you've done a few presentations in your time, that'd be fair to say?
I've actually tried to calculate this recently. And I think I'm up to 948,000 presentations.
Oh my Lord. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I apologize. That's slides.
Slides.
That's 900,000 slides, of which I think it's a...
That's you and the business that's achieved.
It is. That's okay. I like to say me and my team.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's a magic number. And I know I realize it might not be exact. It'd be kind of cool if you tracked it from now so you know when the million comes, because that would be...
I would love that. Yeah, I think I should make a big deal out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, coming with that level of experience, I think, that's why I invited you down, and thank you for joining us. We really would get some insight. So, and by the way, for anyone listening, I'll be using the word of PowerPoint presentations in the broadest sense. So not talking about that piece of software specifically. I'm an Apple user, so I use Keynote, and obviously there's other tools out there, but we all know what we're talking about, these graphical tools. And it occurs to me that they're used in a pretty wide range of situations, right? I mean, when I think of PowerPoint, I usually think of someone delivering a live presentation. But of course, they're sometimes recorded and used as videos on the standalone videos. They're converted into PDFs and sent out to internally, etc. But I think primarily, I mean, perhaps I guess this is a good question to start. Is that primarily the sort of tools that you're creating are presentations that using these graphical aids in a kind of live environment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think probably the single biggest use or the biggest chunk of that 900,000 slides would be what we call workshop decks.
Okay.
And a workshop deck is where a management consultant would go in to present to a client and potentially have somewhere between 50 and 400 slides that they would work through over 1 to 5 days.
Oh wow, okay, that's pretty intense.
Yeah. So that would be I would say the most common use of PowerPoint. But truthfully, we use PowerPoint because it's what I call the lowest common denominator. Everybody in business has a copy of PowerPoint on their machine. It comes with Microsoft Office, comes with Windows. The beauty of PowerPoint in particular, or like you said, any presentation software, is when you load up that screen, you used to get a blank piece of A4. And you knew if you were cutting and pasting, dropping bits of text or images, and then hitting the print button, it is WYSIWYG. It is what you see is what you get. And it makes it very, very simple, as opposed to something like Microsoft Word, which has hidden code. It has different levels of formatting. PowerPoint was our first choice to work in because everybody gets it.
And so for you then on that point, is it about delivery? Is it about the fact that you can, after the live presentation, you could hand over those files and then they could be distributed? Is that what you're saying?
That's definitely one point of it. So from an agency point of view, it's our job to make our client look fantastic. That could be look as in the way they deliver their content, but also just graphically, does the content on the screen look fantastic? And then is it easy for them to repurpose it? For instance, there's a bit of a presentation or there's a marketing model on page 5 that they then want to repurpose in a different presentation, possibly even for a different brand or a different company. It's cut and paste. It's very easy to do that. So that's really another big pro point for PowerPoint as such.
So that goes back to a higher question really, which perhaps I should have started with, is, what is the primary purpose? So it occurs to me, it's an assumption on my part, that somebody at some point decided that actually, having a graphical aid for me during this event situation is going to assist me. It's either going to assist me as a presenter, maybe by reminding me what the hell I meant to be saying, and I think that's definitely part of it at times. Maybe it's going to assist the audience in getting what I'm trying to convey. Would you agree with that or expand on that?
I would. Yeah, it's a perfect combination of the two. If you've put your structure down on the paper and it's a linear presentation, then yeah, this will keep you on track. It will keep you focused to the story that you're looking to deliver. But for me, more important than that, because the essence of what I do, I think, is trying to make the complicated simple. So when my clients come to me with quite a complicated idea that they're looking to explain, I think one of the reasons why they particularly like working with me is that it takes me 2 or 3 goes to actually get it. But when I do get it, I think I'm very good at then conveying that message in a simple form. So I would say that's the primary reason why you would want to put something visual behind you when you're either telling a story or explaining a process. I think the primary reason would be to help your audience understand.
Because I always think that's amazing, actually, how wide the gap can be from what we think we are telling people clearly to what they're receiving. And for me personally, I particularly remember a couple of businesses where I was, it was an early startup business, and it was really clear to me what we were doing and who we was doing it for. But honestly, the feedback was, some confusion. And sure, we got better at it over time. I'm not sure we ever got it perfect. I'm not sure there is a perfect, but I was at times absolutely amazed how big a gap there was. And in some of my software sort of development experience, again, some of the examples there were huge. And, you'd have a comment come in that say, well, I didn't know where to go next. And you look at the page they're on, and literally there was one big round green throbbing button. I'm not even joking. And it's like, really? Like, I don't know what else I could do in this universe to make it more clear. But sometimes there's this real gap, and it's dangerous assumption. I think we all make this assumption that people understand us. So I want to go back to what you were saying about the questions that you must be asking your clients so that you get it, so that you can then produce some graphical material for it. And I think that's a real skill. So even if we're doing that for ourselves, trying to distill it down, how do you work that out?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because often I would get asked to do this and not get a full verbal brief. So for me, it would just be about just applying some simple processes to the actual visual or the information. And they would just be some very, very basic design principles. So, hierarchy of information, using colors to separate different elements, font size, positioning, white space, or even just the actual structure of the model. So when we were talking about this, I automatically started thinking of like a business process or a marketing model, because we've done just so many thousands of them. And they're the ones really that are worth taking the time and investing in design to make sure that that model communicates the message well. So once we'd applied some basic design principles and just tried to make it visually pleasing, if that's all we can do, then at least we've taken it some of the way. And it may take a couple of rounds of iterations from coming back and forth with the client before it's absolutely perfect. But from a graphic designer's point of view, and if you're not, incredibly technical or particularly marketing minded, or you don't really truly understand the content, then just by applying the design principles of making it look good, making it simple to follow, making sure the hierarchy of the information and the color coding's right, then I think you're off to a good step, good first step.
Sure. I guess that's a lot about presentation. If we're talking about particularly if it's as you say, a marketing piece, then visually you want to convey some level of professionalism, as well as, of course, the content being important. And of course, the default mechanism for anybody pitching for investment is a pitch deck. I mean, that seems to be like an unwritten law, probably is written down somewhere, that if you want to get funding, you need a pitch deck. If you haven't got pitch decks, you just can't even start. And so you've got, businesses around the world, sometimes they're pitching for, multi-million-pound deals, and they've got to distill that down into 8 to 10 slide presentation. And that's a skill and art form. I've had a good go at that in the past. Actually, what I really like about presentations like that is it forces you down to concise language. I find that a good exercise in myself. So I know if someone's trying to convey a concept to me, if I can't get it clearly, if I can't, as a visual person, if I can't draw a picture in my mind about how that graph looks, then you kind of lost me a little bit. Which is where things like, say, cryptocurrency, which I think is quite a complex area, so I have some interest in, but it's kind of failed in the challenge many times for me. People haven't been able to sum it up in a very concise way because it's still so largely unknown. But it's such a good skill for us to do, but be it internally, to convey values, if you're thinking about delivering a presentation, to kind of go through that exercise ourselves. So that's one of the reasons I use it a lot, for that kind of
Sure.
discipline.
Yeah, with the language, that's something that actually would have to come from the client. The simplification of the language. So we really specialize on layouts, signposting, like I said before, hierarchy of information, displaying the information, making it simple and logical to follow. But the actual language itself comes from, and the vast majority of my clients are management consultants, and they are the content experts. But just one thing, as you were telling me that story, just the one thing that made me kind of like agree with you is longer words instill intelligence, but shorter, simpler words give you trust. And I think that's probably what most of the presenters are looking to do. They're looking to engage their audience with a story, and they're looking to build trust and understanding of what they've done. So shorter, simpler terminology is the way to go.
I really like that. I know that I'm sure some people will be a fan of Boris Johnson, some won't be, but I read his book on Churchill. I'm not much of a reader, actually. I think I was on holiday somewhere, and I actually found it really interesting, to my surprise. And he obviously, as a professional speaker, clearly examined some of the best speakers, and Churchill was his guy. And one of the sort of tricks that Churchill would use very quite say complex language or in-depth, multi-syllable language, etc., to explain a point. But then at the end, sum it up in like what I would call pub language. And actually, I've seen Boris tries to copy this formula a lot, as other people do, and I have to say it comes across incredibly well. It kind of shows authority by using the fancy language at the start, but halfway through you think, okay, I think they sound like they know what they're talking about, but I'm not sure I really totally understand it. And then they go bang, and they've summed it up in like one sentence. Okay, got it. I've seen that work well.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that, because I think what you're implying is that actually you're giving them both. You're giving them the intelligence, and then you're building the trust with the short language. And as you were describing that, just the way that I think, I'm imagining quite a busy, chaotic slide that then could then be condensed down into something very simple and very easy to follow. And there's classic tricks like chevrons, let's get it into as simple a form as possible, or possibly even, a cyclical model.
So just explain chevrons a bit more for me.
Sure. Chevrons would be just blocks of information that lead from one to another. So
we're talking like a block of text with like an arrow. Is that what we're talking about?
Exactly. Okay. Exactly that. So
Okay.
if it's a 5-stage process and it works in orders number 1 to 5, then sort of like the first place that we would start. I mean, certainly when we first started doing this, that would be the kind of go-to graphical device to explain a series of steps. And it really is down to the author, the content creator, to try and simplify that as best as possible. And from a designer's point of view, the way that I work and the way that I like my team to work is we do what we think the client is asking for, and then we duplicate that slide very quickly and easily, just duplicate that slide, and then do what we think. And possibly you might duplicate that slide 4 or 5 times until you get to like the designer's choice. And the designer's choice is, that long wordy paragraph, I just put it down to 1 word. Why did you do that? Oh, we did it because it looks nicer and it's simpler to follow. So it really is a collaboration between content writer and designer. And if the two can work well together, then you should get yourself a pretty coverage.
And I guess that's a fairly safe exploration for you. You've not said, actually, client, we disagreed with you, we've done this instead. You said, this is what we understood, we've delivered this, but take a look at this as well.
Yeah, now don't get me wrong, some design agencies, and in particular, some very talented designers would definitely do that. And they would get quite upset or quite insistent that their way is best. But We are a little bit different. I do think that we are a bit of a one-of-a-kind agency because we truly are here to serve our clients. I also respect that my clients are actually quite brilliant at what they do. They're top-end management consultants. They've either been to Oxford or Cambridge University. They've worked as a brand manager for 6 years, and they know their industry inside out. And now they're consulting in that industry. That is kind of no way I can overstep that mark.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I am there to serve them. They are extremely busy, and it's my job to take that away from them, to take away, you know, they should not be doing their own design.
Yeah.
And there's a few reasons why not. I can go into that if you want, but like one of them is financial. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for a top flight consultant or an extremely busy CEO or a highly well-paid professional person. It doesn't make sense for them to do their own design. And that's really how my business has been born.
Yeah. Yeah, great. And I wanted to talk about, you know, I've seen obviously different sides, not as many as you, I'm sure. And sometimes they are almost word for word for what somebody's going to say, and somebody will read from it. Sometimes they're like not much more than a cue marker. Sometimes it's just like almost like a chapter title with 1 or 2 words, and then the person can talk for 20 minutes with just that chapter heading in the background. Where are you on that sort of spectrum?
Sure. Like where do I sit? What do I prefer, or what do I mostly do?
I suppose I'm asking what you think in general is the most effective.
Sure. I remember maybe 13 years ago, I had the first consultant that said to me, I like 1-word slides. And I was like, wow, okay. Well, you know, where do we go from here? And I actually found that my skill would be to select the right image that complements that, or sometimes even kind of manipulate an image to represent exactly what it is that they're trying to say. So I absolutely love that approach. But it normally does take a well-selected image to reinforce that message. Personally as well, the other thing that I really love, I love it when words are synced with the presenter. So I don't like having words ahead on a slide, because your audience will simply just go ahead and read them and start thinking of their own story.
That makes sense.
A lot of the time we would work on a voiceover script, so like an animated presentation that's saved out as a video. What is incredibly powerful, and what I nearly always recommend to my clients, is that when you say the word segmentation, the word segmentation appears on the screen, or the visual appears, and that the two things must be synced together. It's an incredibly powerful way of doing it. And the flip side of that is just staying with segmentation, because it's an old classic that I've had to find images for so many times. The classic is, if you're talking about segmentation and other things are appearing on the screen, you are totally confusing them. I mean, they don't know if they listen or they read, and you will lose your audience. So syncing of the words. I love the full page image and just simple 1-word slides. But they are few and far between. You know, that's how you please people with your design pitch, or when you design a template, they're like, wow, this template looks amazing. Now, please get all of this content onto my slide as well. It's like, okay.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely true. I actually did a little, I suppose you could like a little summary intro video actually for this series of podcasts. And then there I sort of talk about, we've got, you know, experts from Australia, from UK, and I've got little pop-ups of videos kind of appearing, that's why it's in the background, but actually, you know, cut in over the top of me. And the first one I used was Australia, as I cut to these people. And the first person didn't come from Australia, although it totally implied that, and I had no intention to try and convey that. So I had to actually change it, and I actually need to pick somebody from Australia for that slide. It actually will look like I'm actually incorrect by saying it. And you're right, just as you say it, there's something magical about being in sync, as you say. I mean, it's just because it lands as so like slick and like, wow, that is bang on. I can imagine someone does that live, obviously with a button. It kind of just really lands smoothly. Which actually, using this analogy the other day, actually yesterday, about business in general, but it still holds true for design. I feel like a raw early business is like a jagged piece of rock, and I feel like design is exactly the same. And as we refine that design, it gets smoother and smoother, and until eventually it looks like a beautiful, smooth pebble. And that smooth pebble can literally glide through water, air, so smoothly. And that feels to me like an example of that. It would, I mean, just, and here we're going to talk about segmentation, bang. And it's just like, it's just going to land good as the person viewing that, for sure.
Yeah, I like your analogy. I was
Yeah.
imagining skimming that across to the other side of the pond.
Yeah, and it's kind of got no resistance to it. I think that's what we're trying to get to, as opposed to jagged images or text that kind of bombard. So, so obviously one word is about as extreme as it gets, but would you say that in an ideal environment, that's what you're reaching for, or one image, one word, sort of signage to as effective as a topic holder?
Yeah, if you're working with the presenter that knows their topic inside out and knows where to talk, or knows how to talk around that topic, and knows where they're going with the end presentation, then yeah, that's a very nice system. But it doesn't happen that often.
No.
Mostly people do want to convey more information than that, and they do want the reinforcement of that on the slides behind them.
I mean, I guess you guys are probably very experienced presenters. For me, at times, I've definitely been in situations where actually the most important thing for me is to not forget what I'm about to say, and actually that trumps everything. And it sounds like a small thing, but if you're delivering a presentation to 1,000 people or so, which I've been in that situation, trust me, the scare was high, and even if I believed it was a less good presentation, because it did have basically a lot of what I was going to say, that was still preferable over being stuck on stage and having total, blank moment. That would have been pretty bad, to say the least.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So I think that is the most common situation, that the presenter designs the presentation or designs the content flow of the presentation to aid them to tell their story, to aid them to get their information out in the order that they planned it when they were at their desk. So a lot of people will use bullet points for that. So they'll talk around a bullet point, press the space bar or click the clicker and go, oh yeah, and next is, and it really does keep them on track like that.
Yeah.
There's lots of different arguments to that. I'm sure you've heard of death by PowerPoint, which is like a bit of a movement now. And a lot of people would say, oh, hasn't that affected your business? Oh, death by PowerPoint, isn't that dangerous? Why would people, with all this talk of people being bored, why do people still come to you to do more PowerPoints? And it's just the easiest way to display and flow your information.
But when they're talking about death of PowerPoint, they're talking about where someone's just got, pretty much verbatim every word they're going to say on screen. Really, that's what I think of by death by PowerPoint. Did you take something different, or?
No, I do.
Okay.
I completely agree. But we talked a little bit about using the PowerPoint to stay on the story that you wanted to tell in the order that you wanted to tell it. And that kind of touches on death by PowerPoint. What I think is a massively growing trend is storytelling, is being way more open, is inviting audiences to ask you questions throughout your presentation. It's just much more engaging if you have those presentation skills within you. If you are that type of stand-up speaker, then probably you would avoid doing the system that we just spoke about, where all of the information is laid out in a linear form. Another thing that we can do is we could add like what I call website functionality to a PowerPoint presentation, which in its very simplest is just called hyperlinking. So you could pull up a content slide, or you could pull up a marketing model, and then depending on the audience, or depending on some of the questions that you're getting from the audience at that time, or just gauging how the information is being processed, or if you're captivating your audience. It just gives you that freedom to be able to go off plan, you know, to jump to the end section if that's what you think the crowd are looking for. So a presentation can also be designed that way so that it's non-linear.
Yeah, I think you've got to be quite probably quite experienced with your slides to feel comfortable jumping around. I can imagine a situation where I would be a little bit less reluctant, you know, to do that. But I think if someone's skilled and it's something they're well rehearsed in, they go, oh yeah, let's jump back to that. We can come back to this later. It takes a bit of kind of confidence to do that.
It does. And like you said, you'd be a well-rehearsed speaker. But again, when you say that, I don't think of the speaker. I'm actually never the speaker. I'm always like the backstage guy. What I think is, no, most speakers would be able to do that, and they would want to do that. What would prevent them doing that is if they couldn't operate their presentation. You know, if it hadn't been hyperlinked, you know, and they're pushing next slide 14 times, and then people are seeing all their content, and then they're jumping back to slide 11, and
I can see that presenter panic, and they get in distress, and that's, you know, for
sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So the hyperlinked kind of solution, I think is the way that I would allow that to happen. You know, just something very simple and easy. We also do that with signposting.
So just to interrupt there. So we're talking about hyperlink. Sure. Are we jumping out to an external website, or are we just using that hyperlink within the document to access another page inside the same document?
Yeah, when I was describing it, I'm thinking that you're hyperlinking within your presentation, and then you would have the functionality to be able to jump back to that contents page or that main page. But there's within PowerPoint, there's absolutely no reason why you wouldn't go to an external video or some media. But again, just be careful that you know how to get back in.
So you could, in fact, I've not really seen anyone do this. I'm sure probably thousands have. You could effectively have a menu column on the left-hand side or at the bottom, and use that as almost like as you say, a web menu bar, and jump around. Just say, okay, got it. Okay, that'd be very interesting, actually.
Yeah, just like you, I mean, I presume that you design websites as well as apps. So you're always thinking, right, so where do they go from here? And you'd have to do that. You'd have to apply that same logic with the presentation. You don't want to send them down to a dead end. So that's what I meant by signposting. It used to be in the old days just like a little picture of a house. You just put a little house icon, and you always knew that you could click that on any slide and jump back. There's also the arrow keys that most people are very familiar with, you know, to quickly go up and down one. But it's just to consider, okay, where do we go after this? You know, to always have an option as to navigate back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like that, actually. And I always think that I always feel that there's sometimes a bit of a war between an editor, someone that's very wordy, and a designer, or someone that's very visual. And it seems to me, and my evidence point is road signs. So any country in the world, as far as I know, you're driving down the road, and the designer of that road sign has got to tell that driver, who might be doing, 70 miles an hour, whatever, in, I don't know, a quarter of a second, that there's a roundabout coming up, or traffic lights, or something which is potentially important information. And they've all concluded that basically one word, maybe 2 words maximum, and a simple, what we'd call a vector image, or if I hate to use the word clip art image, but a very simple non-photographic image is the fastest and perhaps the best way to get that knowledge into the brain as fast as possible. And I think there's definitely some learning in that. I feel like if you're driving down the road and you see a prominent sign, even if you wanted to not see it, you can't help but absorb it in some way, right? Just because it almost bypasses the thought process. I would largely argue. You haven't got to interpret it. It bypasses that, and you've got it in a flash. And I guess there's some learning for that when it comes to delivering sort of graphical aids in a sort of presentation environment?
Sure. Something that we've been asked to do a hell of a lot. So now there seems to be, and maybe the trend is starting to die out, but let's say 4 or 5 years ago, there was a big trend with one-page scroll websites.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that one-page website, there would nearly always be a set of icons.
Yeah.
So the role of the icon, just like you described the road sign, is to communicate that information as quickly and as easily as possible. So that when people are looking at, let's say, like a dashboard or, you know, like
Yes.
a report full of information, and let's say they look at that report once a week, then the icons will really aid you to find that information as quickly as possible. One thing that we are very aware of is producing icons for the sake of icons. And that's why I kind of referenced the one-page websites. The job of that icon is to distill that information. If you're designing icons for the sake of icons because you think that they're a beautiful graphical device, then just by the word iconic, you know, they are not being iconic. You know, they're actually confusing the situation and confusing the information. So that's something that we have an awful lot of experience with. And some of my clients now actually insist that there's no icons in their presentation just because they've been done to death.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen a theme or trend over the last few years, particularly in software, where they're moved away from icons. And I've always been a little bit dismissive or not convinced by that personally. I don't like to have to read everything, especially if it's an area that I maybe go to quite frequently. You know, if I learn that icon, again, I can know what it is. I can go there quickly. Sure, maybe I don't know that on the first use, but I'm getting out. I'm being proved wrong, or most people are disagreeing with me. There's a huge, you know, a lot of software is all the menus are just text now, whereas perhaps there were at least text and icons. And as companies become, even small companies are global now, I'm always surprised at that. I mean, you definitely losing people who English, for example, isn't their first language, but the website is predominantly in English. But as I say, it seems to be the current thinking.
Yeah, so as you described that, I always think about things in a presentation or a slide manner. So I was thinking, okay, my client, like we had 4 distinctive icons, and my client has said to me, no, we no longer want icons. How would I replicate the function that icon played? And the answer is with typography. It's with font sizes. It's with use of capitals or lowercase letters. It's with the boxing or the color system that you represent the information on the page. So there are ways to do that, and you shouldn't necessarily think of it as just, oh, now I've got to plow through lots and lots of different words. I can make different words jump off the page. I can take you straight to different sections. You can even pretty much define the hierarchy that people will read a page in.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, there's pretty classic Facebook posts that will tell you, you will read this first, then this, and finally this. You know, and it does. The human brain works that way. So it's just a question of applying those principles. And certainly for my big client that has banned all use of icons. I mean, clip art was banned 15 years ago, and about 3 or 4 years ago, icons were totally forbidden too. Yeah. That's how we go about it. We go about it with actually it's a collaboration. I need them to provide me with simpler language, and then equally I will design those words on that page to be as simple for the user to follow as possible.
I mean, I guess, I mean, if I can find a link for that example of the Facebook page, I will attach it, because I think it's very interesting, and I haven't done it for a long time, but it was remarkable, just like, oh my God, it knows exactly what I'm doing. And there's different sort of eye movement behavior, as you know. There's Z form, there's T shape, but there are, I don't know enough about this area, but you know, the eyes move in a certain direction, you know, classically left to right, which is why a right-handed sided advert in a newspaper will cost you twice as much as a left-handed sided advert, etc. I'm not sure everyone knows that, but so that's, yeah, you can.
Old school newspaper ads.
Yes, those were the days. Show my age now. So that's a fascinating area, and I'm sure you've done it as well. Sometimes ask clients, okay, you tell me what's the most important thing on this page or whatever it is, and second or third thing. And of course, you get the annoying client who goes, they're all important. Well, that's not the way the brain works. Pick the kind of look at one thing at a time. So which one do you want to see first? I want to see all things. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's quite a useful process to go through. That's kind of like design thinking, right? That you would ask that question to your client, like what is the one single takeaway from this particular slide or from this particular presentation, or from website design, like what is the call to action? You spoke about your big green shiny button.
Yes.
Maybe they saw it, but they just didn't relate to it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think I've always said that business is really easy. The only thing that makes business hard is people, because people are incredibly complicated. And to use that example, for me, it seemed incredible that someone couldn't see this big green button. And I can't remember why. I'm not sure I ever found out why, but it may have been that every other link was in red, and they were scanning the page for a red button. And if there was no red button on the page, well, there was no linking. They didn't think to click on the green button. And I'm not sure often we know why we're making our decisions, but there are reasons for it. And as designers, with our job to try and work out what those are. So I want to talk a little bit about people that are designing for themselves. They are going to be the writer, editor, creator of their own slides. Maybe it is in a marketing situation. So the questions that you would ask of your clients are going to need to ask of themselves. So you kind of covered this a little bit before, but I don't want to predict your answer. But so where should they slide? What's the questions they should ask of themselves to help them map out, decide what is their priorities? Where do they start that process?
Well, that's a really good question. That really is, because it's almost like that is a process that they need to go through themselves to identify what is the key message that they're looking to convey.
And I suspect, and one of the reasons I'm asking it is because I suspect that many don't. Okay, I've got to do a presentation for Fred tomorrow. Open up PowerPoint, logo on the first page, we're awesome on the second, and they're just kind of, rather than, okay, what am I trying to convey? What's the goal? What's the objective? How would I know if I've achieved that? So that's why I'm kind of asking the question.
Yeah, I mean, actually, you've almost answered it as well, because it's almost like there should be a little checklist. But I've never actually worked from that checklist. Maybe it's in my head, but I've never seen anyone actually publish that checklist. So you give me a bit of a thought there that maybe I would write down like the 5 steps that you just said, like what are the objectives? What are we looking for the audience to do? The other idea that I would like to share with you is the poll. So to take a poll.
Oh, yes.
Take a poll at the start of your presentation, and then take a poll again at the end with one simple, clear question, which is obviously your objective. And then see how much difference you've made to that audience. See if your presentation has actually been able to change the attitudes, the mindsets of the people in your audience. So even if you weren't doing that, maybe you could just think through that process. I think that might well help you. The other thing I was going to say is setting that time to do your own writing. So we're basing this on a person that is the content creator, is the author of this information. Often it's the process of doing that writing where the good ideas and the structure will come from. So they probably do need to invest time. They do need to do the classic things like read their words out loud, because you'll find, does it actually resonate? When it was in my head, it all sounded great. And then when I read it out to you, it was absolutely awful. So that's another little system. Plan out your presentation with bullet points and maybe just headings, and see if you can take your audience through that flow, through that system, without going into any detail. So just keep it kind of like headline text only, when
So
you're planning it.
So at this stage, you're talking about maybe just like a Word document. You haven't yet gone into the graphical side. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
definitely. Yeah,
okay.
I would
That makes
say
sense.
most people who are non-PowerPoint designers
Mm.
would start with a Word document, or even, you know, just it doesn't have to be MS Word, but just a list of words on a piece of paper that takes you from A to B.
Yeah,
So
I think
yeah,
that's
I would
very wise. I mean, I think it's kind of dangerous to dive straight in. It's tempting, especially if you know your way around the piece of software, to dive in, because then you skip that critical bit. I mean, I know from anyone that's written a book, I think we'll say a business book, that is, will say the same. At the end of, during that journey, you learn a lot about, categorizing topics and distilling it down. And so the same applies here, I think. If you're going through the rigor of that journey, will help you deliver it, and in a
yeah.
way help you understand it yourself, or at least refine it.
Yeah. So again, I always think of it as a two-person show, because that's the way that I've been working for 20 odd years. That the content creator would do that thought process on the wording and on the flow and on the messaging. But equally, there's a role for the designer to do that. And potentially, if one person is going to do both, then let's work out what your brand values are. The way we were describing that situation, it was based for like a small or a medium-sized enterprise. But the big companies, when they do it, they have brand guidelines, and we work with brand guidelines a lot of the time.
Sure.
So one example with Heineken is they will always display their information in a set font with their logo and the correct use of space. When I'm designing for Heineken, we never use images of anyone under 25, just because it's too close to the legal limit age and it might be interpreted incorrectly. So there's also guidance on language, guidance on length of titles in a presentation. Like, let's not make them wordy, let's keep this simple. Guidance on tone of voice. So if you have a good, strong, established brand, and that brand has a set of guidelines, then equally the designer has a job to do at the start, and that's possibly to construct like quite a robust template, to start putting together images that they think are suitable to help deliver the message, just spacing of the brand, color schemes. And then if you were to give that template to the content creator, then that often is where they like to start, because then they've got kind of like the backbones and they know that it's going to be on brand, and it just might make that creation of the words just a little bit simpler.
Yeah, I can understand that, actually. Okay, that makes sense. So I guess someone isn't the size of Heineken that's watching this, but does deliver presentations. Maybe they're doing a lot of Zoom calls at the moment, like a lot of people, of course, are, and they're considering or using graphical aids, PowerPoints, in addition to face-to-face stuff. And I want to ask you about that as well, actually. So don't let me forget. I want to come back to that point. In fact, actually, let's just go there now, actually, because obviously we're talking face-to-face. We're not using any graphical aids for this communication. Any thoughts that you have? I'm sure you have to do face-to-face Zoom calls with your clients. You work abroad in Thailand, but for the most part, most of your clients are in the UK or US. So where do you sit on that? Do you do face-to-face? Do you just use graphics?
Yeah, I love to screen share personally. A lot of the time we will be collaborating on a document together. So the screen share is a really effective way to work for me personally. I also have an Indian bookkeeper, and when we screen share and she uses Excel, I just sit back and watch her use this software in complete admiration. I think it instills confidence if you are particularly fluent in a system or a process or in a piece of software. So that's why I like screen share, because I know every single click in PowerPoint, and it's actually quite an efficient way to work with a client. I would also always prepare visuals. I love working from visuals, but that's the name of my game. And the other thing that I would suggest that everyone should do as just a starting point is spend time on your front cover. Spend time on that first page. Get the title right. Get the complementary image right. Invest in that image. Because if you get that first slide right, often that's 60% of your work done.
Really, that's interesting.
They've seen something they resonate with on page one. The image feels right. Maybe they see themselves as the person that you've chosen on the cover, or they can relate to it, or they relate their target audience to that cover. And then you've defined your title. Have an engaging title. And then this is my thing. So when my team design, and I then proof check it before sending it back to the client, when it comes back with a dull front cover, it's like the first thing that I absolutely have to change, or the first thing that I get involved in myself, and make sure that's right before it goes back to the client.
I'm actually quite surprised. I'm learning from that. It's really good because, I had assumed that it's a Heineken presentation. The first page is going to be a big green slide with the logo Heineken and nothing else, and it would actually be the slide that had the least attention on it. But you're correct in saying that actually that's an opportunity to really maybe set the context.
Yeah, it's also the slide that people tend to leave up the longest, right? So they're either preparing for the speech or they're introducing themselves. For me, it's a really important slide, but I'm actually saying that also from a designer's point of view. So I've spent 8 hours designing this presentation for you, and I want you to sign off on it. I want you to love my work. Well, hit them with something at the first page that you know is great, that you're proud to present and proud to put up on screen. So that's me as a designer presenting that to a client, but equally for the presenter presenting to their audience, same logic applies.
Okay, cool. And any general thoughts about photographic versus cartoon images, vector images, or is that too?
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. So with some big healthcare companies, we have always used what we call generic figures. So
like silhouettes.
They like that. Yeah, silhouettes was a massive one. Also, kind of like bubble men. I say bubble men, bubble person. So the idea.
What's a bubble person? I think I'm getting close to being a bubble person as we speak, but that's for different reasons.
Yeah, it's your lockdown diet.
That's my diet, yeah.
The bubble person is the generic person that isn't a man, isn't a woman, isn't from Asia, isn't from Europe, isn't, it allows a global corporation to use this without taking on the stereotypes that people would naturally apply if it was a photograph. So we now do quite a lot of animated explainer videos.
Good. I was interested to ask you about this.
Cartoon characters a lot on explainer videos, and there is some science behind it. And the thought is that people don't judge. So when I say people, I mean the audience. The audience doesn't judge the cartoon character in the same way that they would judge the stock photography or the person. So it may just be like the color of the tie, or just like just one element within that person that distracts them. But with the cartoon character, people tend to believe it more. They tend to be less offended by cartoon characters. And generally throughout our history, cartoons have been delivering like either fun or making the complex simple, or potentially delivering quite bad news in a more light-hearted or jovial way. So
yeah, I think like sex education at school and things of that nature, which are difficult subjects, right? But they can use cartoon imagery to kind of soften the distraction of that, I suppose.
Absolutely. And then from a designer's point of view, the reason why we love doing that is because anything is possible, So if your client said, oh, I want them to climb up a mountain and then fall on their head, and then climb up a mountain and fall on their head, like how would I do that without a cartoon visual? But with a cartoon visual, I can make it fun. I can make it so that it doesn't look like anyone dies. You can just keep it exactly. This is what I mean by anything's possible. You can pretty much manipulate the graphics to do anything that you want them to do.
So have you seen that
And
growing as a requirement or a request, or is it just something that you have been going to and suggesting and clients have saying, yes, I like this approach?
yeah, I think because we've been storyboarding ideas with clients, so they've written their script, and let's say they're painting the picture of a rosy future for, I'm thinking that it's a management consultant. They're painting a picture of, if you come with our consultancy in 3 years' time, your organization will look like this. And they're painting that picture. Very hard to find a photograph that's gonna represent that image, but actually quite easy to do it with an animated character with bespoke illustrations.
Yeah.
And we can easily color them to the right brand. So let's say that it's a pharmaceutical company, and they're talking about the fact that their staff will all be very well trained in 2 years' time because of the program that they're implementing. It's very easy to just get those characters, put some kind of branding on them, or maybe just like a little badge to represent that they're from that company. And then it's very easy to turn like slightly confused faces to that light bulb moment of engaging their audience. So yeah, cartoons are a great way of doing that, and are accepted in the business world as a good way to communicate.
Very interesting. I'm still a little bit torn on the whole cartoon thing. I actually recently purchased a platform, access to a platform to do this. I've yet to sort of play around with it. But that seems like it's edging towards almost producing film, right? Or am I missing? I mean, are you having audio of what the cartoon characters are saying, or are you just having text, speech mouths, or how do you do that?
Typically, the cartoon characters don't talk. Typically, it's like a pre-recorded professional voiceover artist.
Okay.
And the cartoon character is there to illustrate the points that they're saying. So the topic might be quite dry. The voiceover might be quite complicated and fairly hard to follow. So it's the job of the visuals to just simplify that. And again, timing is everything, so when that person, or when the voiceover delivers the actual wording of that complicated process, the visuals must complement that and help communicate that point.
So that would effectively be almost like a film within the presentation. The speaker would hit their slide button. On this particular slide, they basically shut up, hit play, and the cartoon would convey some information with the professional voiceover at the same time. Am I understanding correctly?
Sure, could do it that way. Actually, that's not typically the way that my clients do use that. What they would do is they would deliver their presentation themselves, and let's pretend this is like a multi-million-pound pitch. So they deliver their presentation, and then what typically people would do is, oh, and I printed out the presentation for you. Well, we've already seen that presentation. It was on screen, and now it's just a document.
Yeah,
probably going to get left off on the desk. So what my very successful management consultant client does is they would leave them with an animated explainer video. So it reinforces the story. It can tell a bit more. It's new content that they haven't seen, so there's a reason to watch it after the presentation is over. But also, let's say there's other really important decision makers or key stakeholders that weren't able to be in that presentation. Well, the video that you leave behind, I think you called it a movie. I tend to think of it as, yeah, it is a movie, but it's simpler than that.
Yeah.
It's not Hollywood budgets. It's not Hollywood production. It's just very simple, but engaging and pleasant to look at. That MP4 file that you leave behind or that you distribute is very short, very straight to the point, professionally produced, and then very easy for them to share with those people that don't quite get it or weren't in the presentation.
Okay, that's very interesting. But in that example, in a typical example, the presentation itself would have been more orthodox. It would have been normal slides, presenter talking over the top of those slides. And the first time they come across that, the kind of cartoon would have been in the takeaway handout
in like,
or
yeah,
doable?
what I call like the leave behind documents.
Okay.
And in fact, now you've just made me think there's actually a third element to this. So there's the presentation, then there's the document, which some people might call the appendix, like more traditionally. So the deep dive into the financials or the terms and conditions or the legal or any of the really complicated processes. They don't need to go up on screen. Like, it's very, very kind of reassuring for the audience that you say, right, here's my presentation, here's the detail, and then there's the third element, which is like the overview, the big picture, you know, almost like the sales document, but animated in a form that they can easily distribute.
Brilliant. I think that's fantastic. There was just one question I probably should have asked it earlier on, actually, but I just don't want to
Sure.
miss it. When putting together a presentation, in general, do staff saying during this presentation we're going to cover A, B, C, D, and kind of do what is, I suppose, effectively a contents page of a book, or do you dive in just one chapter at a time? You know, some people seem to have different philosophies on that.
Yeah, I think it's very dependent on the speaker and their objectives. Traditionally, we would treat it a bit like an e-learning exercise. So just going back to what I said was the vast majority of my slides, which is like a workshop deck. You know, we've got 5 topics that we need to cover today. Here they are listed. And then after we've covered number 1 and it's grayed out, it's number 2. And I just touched on before, like signposting. People like signposting in a presentation. They like to know where they are, you know.
Yeah, they don't know which box they're in.
Yeah, well, same for online quizzes or online surveys. I like to know if I'm on page 1 of 13.
Yes.
You know? It will allow me to adjust the way that I process that work and that information. And equally, if it's just page 1 of 1, then maybe you sit back and you think about it differently. So I call this signposting. It comes from the contents page. So when we leave the contents page, maybe top right corner, there might just be a little device that lets you know you're on section 1 of 6, and just gives the big overview of where you are and where you've got to get to. So that's typically the way that we have most commonly worked. But then I'm not saying that the other way is wrong at all. You know, start with a fantastic open-ended question, and then
open the loop.
You know, work around it as you will, and have just beautiful images to aid you on your discussion. If you can present that way, fantastic.
Yeah. And last question, which is, would you, I know often some people would also mirror that at the end and say, okay, during this talk we have covered A, B, C, and kind of sum it up, maybe in bullet points, to kind of give them a little refresher. I'm not quite sure about the science behind that, but it does seem to refresh their memory, particularly if it's perhaps a longer presentation. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's just common. That's just a good common practice with anything. Let's just take presentations out of the equation there. If you're having a face-to-face meeting, I think it's a great way to start with some points and then to go back and say, right, and have we addressed this? That sounds more like the school of sales, you know, like how to influence people. Tell them the objectives at the start and then cross them off at the end. Have we achieved what we set out to do?
Yeah, I think
that's a good way of getting like approval or getting whatever it is that you need, whatever it is you're striving to achieve from your meeting or your presentation. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, my goal in this presentation was to have a real deep dive into conveying using graphical information, graphical aids during a presentation. I think we've achieved that. So I'm going to give you a pass mark for that.
Sure, great. So maybe is there anything that you would like me to dig out for your audience? Is there anything that I could present to you, or maybe share some of my resources? Because
I don't know the answer to that because I don't know, I guess, what the potential things were. But yes, if there was a link or an asset of some description where I think particularly for people that are creating their own presentations, they're going to use that maybe as a marketing tool or during a clarity call online with a prospect, something like that. And it gives them some clues as to about, best business practices about where to start and things to consider. I know there's lots of rules. There's a 7-7 rule, the 6-6 rule, the 5-5 rule, which are, I don't know if you're into any of those, which just to explain.
Page layouts.
Yeah, so like I think the 5.
Gridding.
Yeah, so I think the 7-7 rule is 7 slides. Actually, the one that I do quite like, let me just go to my notes here if I scribbled it down. I think I did somewhere. Yeah, it's the 10-20-30 rule, which is 10 slides, 20 minutes maximum, 30-point font. And for most people, that's probably not a bad guideline.
I've never heard that
No?
before.
I picked that up.
I mean,
some research.
that to me is way too restrictive.
Okay.
To me personally, because
Sure.
the nature of the work that we do, I mean, not all 900,000 presentations could have followed that.
No, of course, I'm not suggesting that.
What I was thinking was just some resources that I've been using for like 20 years. So like go-to places to find really good images, go-to places to brainstorm icons. There's also a few sites that I use that have royalty-free soundtracks if you're looking to produce,
Perfect.
your own video. So it was those sort of resources.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be a great aid. So yeah, I'd really appreciate that, and I'll include that in the description. We'll put this out via YouTube and our podcasts, and we'll put that information on those pages as well. Is there anything you particularly want to mention? And if people are interested in actually getting a professional presentation done for them, what occurs to me is for some people, yes, maybe on a general basis, they want to do their own, but they could perhaps employ somebody like yourself to do like some default presentations, make sure they're on brand, the right color, the right font, and possibly produce a little bit of a presentation Bible for them as that starting point, which you referred to before, and then they can adjust it from there. How do they contact you and go for it?
Sure. So we actually have like a new client starter pack, and I've only very recently called it that. What that means is design and build a robust template that will allow clients to start being able to produce their own content themselves, but using our design template and using our predefined page layouts, where we've embedded your colors, embedded your fonts, chosen the right font weights, font sizes, and actually built that into your presentation. It would also include, let's say, a handful, 5 or 10, real killer images that you can use on front covers or as slide dividers. It would also include some branded graphics, so some bespoke graphics that we've drawn for you that you could either use as icons or potentially as infographics. What else would that include? That would also include 1 hour of me presenting it back to you and showing you some of all the real shortcuts and some of the real time-saving features of PowerPoint templates. So our business is called PowerPoint Designers. We only offer that service in PowerPoint because it is quite simply the most robust software, and it allows us to do all the things that I've mentioned.
I think that'd be a great, that sounds like a great little package you've put together there. Actually, I think a lot of people would be very interested in that. So where do they go to find out a website or?
Sure, absolutely. You can just either send me an email at ash@powerpointdesigners.net or view my website, which is powerpointdesigners.net, and just send me a message from there. I used to call that product, like I said, I call it the new client starter pack now. But what we used to call
it's not the sexiest name I've ever heard.
It's not, but maybe I'll go back to the old one. We used to call it box of tricks.
Okay.
So I'd say, right, so I'll design your PowerPoint template, and we'll keep it very simple. It's quite, not too many pages in it. But then also, would you benefit from having a box of tricks? And a box of tricks is like when you're just trying to seek some creativity, when you're thinking, oh, how can I lay out this information? Then you go to your box of tricks, and it has lots of different charts and graphs and shapes.
Box of tricks is a lot better. I like that. Much more catchy. Okay, on that note, I think we'll leave it there. It's been an absolute joy to have you on the presentation today.
Thanks,
really got some insights. and I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Good man. Thank you so much.
So that was the presentation, the interview with Ashley Pemberton. I will, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll include some links below. If you're listening to this on a podcast, then you may want to go to our blog page, where I'll include all the links that Ashley has sent over to us. So our blog page is just expert-velocity.com/blog, and you'll find us there. So just that, a web address again, expert-velocity.com/blog. And as I say, we'll include the links that Ashley has provided there. So that's it from me. Hope you got a lot of insights from that interview. I did. I think there was some real gold there. And of course, it's coming from someone that's got a serious amount of experience. And I never want to produce as many slides as Ashley and his team have done. But, you know, communicating is it's the critical tool, right? It's about engagement and conversing and getting your point across in a way that people can understand, and clearly these kind of graphical aids can help us achieve that. Okay, so that's it from me, over and out, and I hope to see you on the next one very soon. Bye for now.